Welcome back to Cultivate Talk. Our careers often become one of the biggest parts of our identity. They influence how we introduce ourselves, how we define success, and even how we make sense of who we are. But those ideas aren't formed in isolation. They are shaped by our conversations, our cultures, and the stories we tell ourselves about what meaningful work looks like. Today's guest brings a unique perspective to that conversation. Drawing from a career that has taken her across different countries, institutions, and teaching roles, she explores how communication influences our professional identities, how intercultural experiences reshape our understanding of purpose, and why fulfillment often comes from places we don't expect. In this conversation, we discuss identity, career transitions, intercultural communication, and what it really means to find purpose in your work. Whether you're just beginning your career, considering a new direction, or simply reflecting on what matters most, I think you'll find this discussion both thoughtful and inspiring. Here's my conversation with Dr. Mary Eberhardinger. So much for taking time out of your summer, out of your week to connect with me, Mary, and talk about your wonderful work. I am very excited to be able to pick your brain a little bit and hear about your research and your book and you in general. How are you doing today?
Better than I deserve. I'm doing great. Thanks for asking, and I hope you are as well.
I am. Thank you so much. So, to kind of kick things off, your book asks a deceptively simple question. What are you willing to do for free? What inspired that question, and why do you think it resonates so deeply with people?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Emily. I'm happy to be here. It's really the pleasure is mine. And thanks for your interest in my book and in my work, and actually for taking a close reading at my background. I can tell that you did like a rhetorical analysis of sorts of
Yeah, of
my.
course.
You really did, and you noticed some things that you caught in your questions. My book asks a simple question, and I tweak that question based on the audience I'm talking to. And so for today's podcast, I decided to creatively spin the research question that my book asks in a way that might be more accessible and invite people to engage. So let me just talk about the research question that my book asks, and it's this: what is the relationship between rhetoric and gifts? It's really that simple. And I really think that research can be simple, and it doesn't mean it's not intellectual or not complicated. And it really requires, I think, a passion and a background and gift and rhetoric, and then bringing it together, kind of like a Reese's cup, okay? Right? With
Yeah.
research, you've got
Yeah.
this is I want to break it down for folks. You've got chocolate and peanut butter. You bring it together, you have a Reese's cup. Well, that's what my book does. I look at rhetoric and I look at gift, and I put them together in a way that I don't think a lot of people have done. And so my book did win an award for originality and creativity from Duquesne University when it was put out. Um, at that time, it was 2020, and it was my dissertation work, which I adapted into a book, which many people do. And so, yeah, I'm happy that you invited me to talk about it. But that's the question. That's the research question the book asks. What is the relationship between gift and rhetoric? And the book is, a response to the question, right? And so the response to the question is the researcher's contribution to the field. And so that's what I lay out, and that's what I do. In terms of today and kind of the spin that I've offered, what are you willing to do for free? It's really when we think about giving our time, right? Sacrificing our time, what are we giving? Our attention, our time. And in the world of work, in the world of jobs, we very much are giving something. And so, yeah, I'm excited to talk more, but I'd like to tweak my research question and say, what do you find yourself freely doing? Um, in your free time? And we can talk about that more, because I want to kind of show how your hobbies or your passions or your pastimes can sometimes integrate into a job. Not always, but some people manage to integrate those paths, and that can be a wonderful thing. But I don't think it's the end of the world if we don't integrate those hobbies, interests, and things that we're giving our time freely, right? In our free time, right? So, anyway, more for later, but I hope that that clarifies the book's question.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a very good articulation kind of about your framework as well as your book, as well as kind of like what it is you research and you talk and you write about. And so that last notion that you brought up in regard to some people's pastimes and hobbies becoming part of what they do is a good segue into my next question because many of us are taught about work primarily in terms of salary or career advancement and all the different intricacies that fall under those umbrellas. How has your own journey challenged that way of thinking?
Thanks. So, definitely, I've traveled to 11 countries um, by myself. I've lived in other countries. I've had a variety of jobs that are mostly in education and administrative work. But how has my travel kind of shaped how I think about work and purpose? Well, what I think is that it's okay if your career or your job is not your life's purpose. As a matter of fact, you might find that your life's purpose is being a great mother or being a great friend or being a wonderful partner. And so that might be your life's purpose. And it doesn't necessarily need to marry into your job. If it does, wonderful. Don't get me wrong. If your life's purpose magically and divinely integrates into your, that would probably be a vocation, a calling. People believe in a divine calling. Then that's absolutely wonderful. But I want to take a stance here and say that a job can be a means to an end, and it really is okay if you find yourself like I'm in the middle. I'm in a transition right now. I'm definitely working, but I'm in a transition, and that's how I want it to be. Right? I've always been moving on purpose, on purpose, and so going back to what have I found about how work and travel affects your idea of purpose. Again, a job can be a means to an end to live out your purpose. And so it's okay if you're not doing some morally upright job. And so I've taught for 16 years, but I'm open to actually um, doing alternative work.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's such a like a refreshing outlook to have because kind of with that question, I feel like, a lot of the messages received and perceived throughout our lives is around, needing to be committed to a certain career path or a certain position and, climbing the corporate ladder or making more money or having the correct or the admirable or the desired um job title and all of these things that like what you were articulating and explaining is actually much more realistic and I think a lot healthier of a way to kind of perceive it. So I think that's incredibly important to talk about and share. And with that, like
Yes.
commu- communication scholars often talk about identity as something we continuously construct. And I think oftentimes when it comes to what we end up doing in life, it's like we're constructing this identity of our professional selves or our identity as a particular person in a certain job title. How do our conversations about work influence the way we understand who we are?
Great question, and thanks for tying in communication scholarship and identity work into what we all do here on planet Earth. So, to answer your question, from the bias of an American on the East Coast, And bias is not a dirty word. It's not a negative word. We all have bias, but it's important to situate you and I's conversation, Emily, into this where we're coming from is from this American upbringing and socialization and cultivation of what it means to hold a job. One of the first questions people ask in small talk, at least in the United States, and a lot of times on the East Coast, and I've lived on the West Coast. I lived in Asia. I've lived everywhere. Is they say, "So what do you do?
So true.
What do you do for a living?" And so I think that we're getting away from that. I think we are. And when you travel, you see how different people and different cultures view work and why people work. And there's so many different kinds of work. We now have fractional work. We have job stacking. We have consultant work. We have, hey, my life's identity and purpose and self esteem and self efficacy is not reliant on what I do for a living. I think that's a powerful position to be in. And so, yeah, your question was about identity. Of course, we've been tied up in that for a long time, at least in the United States. But I'd like to think that we're stepping away from that. I think some people are tired of that myth. And don't get me wrong, I think we should all support ourselves. Or if you have a family, you're providing for yourself or your family. But, I want to talk about, well, what's enough? And again, that American standpoint, sometimes it gets convoluted with, well, I need more, I need excess labor. No, what about just necessary labor? Yes, I'm invoking Karl Marx just a bit right here. It's I think some of us are getting away from the I am what I do for work. We've heard of you are what you eat, you are what you work. No, not really. We're not one trick ponies. We're multifaceted people with a lot more going on than just our job.
Yes, and that's such an incredibly important distinction because you are right. It's very common in the United States and like East Coast, West Coast, doesn't really necessarily matter where, to kind of lead conversations and small talk with that. And a lot of our perceived identity, but a lot of our communication with each other is around work, like what it is we are accomplishing, working on, what's you know, taking up our headspace, what's filling our plate. And I think we're kind of torn. Like some people are realizing that that can be toxic and unhealthy. And other people are realizing like when you finally kind of relinquish the need to talk about it so much, it feels a little bit empowering, but it also can open your mind to what you were saying, like how we're just multifaceted creatures and we're able to kind of talk and um, do more and kind of like fill our lives with more. So I really love that notion and I kind of love how much time and attention you bring to it because especially like in academia, it can be really easy to get caught up in like the hustle of it all and kind of like
Hmm.
having to stay productive and like almost that toxic productivity that I think your framework is incredibly important. So I appreciate kind of like what it is that your work kind of brings to the table and kind of what it puts into question. And so with
Thank you.
that, yeah, of course, with that, your work seems to invite people to reflect on what motivates them behind beyond financial compensation and kind of like what you were just saying in regard to providing for families and all of what life brings to
Right.
us. How can asking ourselves, what would I do for free, help us make better personal or professional decisions?
Sure. So going back to what do you find yourself doing in your free time? Taking photos, pruning your garden, spinning records, gabbing with your friend, but actually being a really good armchair therapist. What are you doing in your free? What are your interests? And if you can manage to perhaps integrate those roads with interests and somehow monetizing it, great. Okay, that's wonderful. Like, a person who really likes to play Pokemon in their free time, and they found a way to get on YouTube, share their screen, and monetize them playing Pokemon for an audience. Look, that's wonderful, but we don't have to monetize. There doesn't always have to be an income stream attached to the lives that we live. And okay, so I'm not taking, I want to describe two schools of thought. The hey, you play Pokemon and you're monetizing it on YouTube, or you're reviewing products for Amazon on TikTok. Well, good for you. That's fantastic. But maybe you just like to use products and not monetize or videotape yourself using the products. Both are okay. So what are you doing for free? What I want to tweak the question. What are you doing freely in your free time? Researching about Japanese chins or, whatever it is. And so another example is if you like to bake cakes and you get invited to parties and you bring a cake and you're a cake decorator, right? And you get paid for this, but you're invited to a family event and you bring one of your cakes for free. What are you willing to do for free? You're willing to do that for free. I do think it's important that people are compensated. Please don't get me wrong. Um, I was born and raised in the United States, and we have an aggressive free market capitalist society. Um, and I learn a lot from it. I'm not downing it at all. I learn a lot from it, but I learn a lot from traveling to former communist countries. So, what are you willing to do for free, right? There's always a line that we draw with I might bring a beautifully professionally decorated cake to this event, but I might charge for that cake for my neighbor, right? And so we ask ourselves these questions. What are you willing to do for free? I might watch my parents beagle while they go to the mountains, but I think I'm going to charge this random person on rover.com. I think I'm going to charge them if I watch their dog. So these are just everyday decisions that I think are healthy to think about. I think it's healthy to charge. I think it's healthy to give. Charge, give and take. So that's really balance of this madness of life.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's such an important explanation as well. It's like that balance. It's very easy, I imagine, to like go, to lean one side over the other, and that balance can be instrumental in our lives. And
Yeah.
you bring up the experiences of traveling and kind of, being able to visit different cultures and different countries. And that intercultural communication has been a major influence on your career. What have different cultures taught you about the meaning of work, success, and fulfillment?
Sure, sure. So I was working in Japan as my first job after college. I lived there in the countryside of Japan in Hyogo Prefecture. And I observed the work ethic and the work culture is a very visual culture. What I mean by that is, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, I highly respect and admire Japan. A lot of people who know me know this. Like, Japan's a big part of my life. When I say it's a highly visual culture, I mean that in the teacher staff room, the 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 hour you enter, you make a greeting, a highly visible and audible greeting. And in terms of like showing loyalty and showing respect for the collectivistic effort of the school or the company, you stay for long hours, and there's a face element to it, a face saving element to staying for many, many hours in that workday. I'd like to think that some people are getting away from that. That's a traditional conservative way of Japanese work culture, but that's just one example. I've traveled to Sweden, I've traveled to Central Europe, and quite frankly, going back to that idea of we're not who we are, we're not our jobs. You're not. You are who you eat. You are what you eat. You are what your job is, and we're much more than these things. And so, for example, Sweden, I got the impression that why these extremes? Why the burnout? Why the A plus all the time? Like, how about some kind of moderation or middle ground? And again, this is not all of Sweden. This is just based on my firsthand experience traveling there. Is making a C in a class, a middle grade, is quite all right. Being average is quite all right. And I'm not saying that Sweden is average. I'm saying that there's cultural mentalities that are so different and so refreshing to how, I guess, other countries like the United States are looking at it. I mean, my God, Fran Lebowitz is a famous Jewish author from New York City, and she makes the funny quip, and she says, any white male in the United States who hasn't run for president might think that they're a failure in life. So it's an exaggeration, but we both know that to make a point, we exaggerate sometimes and we dramatize in order for the point to get across. So it's when you travel, you see that work is not everything. I mean, let's do what you can to support yourself and your family if you have a family, but there's a lot more. There's quality of life. There's quality of life, and if you look at, I know that you've looked at my background. There were different times in my life where I could have been the chair of a department, or I could have been working in the president's office at a university, and I rejected those offers gracefully and respectfully. I found quality of life decisions to be of higher value to me. So I could have climbed that career ladder when I was living in Washington State and working for Central Washington University, or when I got again a job offer to be a chair and essentially to be tenured at a private university in the Midwest, in the middle of nowhere in Iowa, quite frankly. And I said, thank you, but no thank you. I'm going to move back to actually where my parents live. They're aging. I have two dogs, and I care about quality of life. So that's a long answer to your question, but yeah, that's how I view some things.
No, I think that is beautiful, and it kind of shows like those different perspectives, especially ones that go against and challenge like that Western culture way of like thinking about jobs and careers and work. And like you said, there is that quality of life component, right? And being near family and being in a place that you genuinely want to be in can be so important, and I would say maybe it allows you to do better work, or maybe work that's more thoughtful and meaningful to you, and
Mhm.
work that is like making a difference and changing perspectives of others who have the pleasure of consuming your work, whether that's reading it or listening to you. I can absolutely see that as being empowering in itself. So yeah, I don't think it was a long answer, but I think it was a great answer. Definitely a great answer to the question. Absolutely. Um, but I'm
Thanks.
kind of switching things on you because that I really like that connection component to what you were just mentioning. And like if someone feels disconnected
Okay.
from their work or uncertain about their purpose, where would you encourage them to begin? Are there questions they should be asking themselves beyond simply what job do I want?
Yeah. What's embedded in the question that you ask is perhaps the assumption that purpose comes from work, that they're
Yeah.
inextricably linked. I mean, and I'm not criticizing the way you asked the question. I'm saying that there is a myth an assumption embedded, again, that you and I have been talking about with kind of Western meritocracy and the myth of our work is our sense of being and our sense of identity and our sense of worth and purpose. And work, I mean, I think it's important. Work is important in terms of structure, schedule, routine, having a purpose, having a reason to get up in the morning. But if someone feels disconnected, I wonder if it's because of that perhaps overbearing, and again, American bias that, oh my gosh, you must have this monolithic passion that is unchanging. Maybe work at a bank for 30 years. That's just not how life is anymore. I mean, it is for some people. You can get a 9 to 5 at an employer and do it for 20, 30, 40 years. And that is fantastic. That is not necessarily the kind of work that I think newer generations are looking at. I don't know if they have access to, like, they can be very intelligent, very good at what they're doing, and they're not getting access to that kind of job security, that kind of I'm finding my life's purpose in my work. And again, my answer to that is it's okay. It's okay if you don't find your life's purpose in your work. There's something really honest and honorable about working at a grocery store. Okay. There's something even more honest about that than some of these, financial advising banks and capitalist enterprises that people are working for. And no offense to people who are working for financial institutions, but if someone is disgruntled or feeling disconnected, I do fear that the anxiety that they're fearing is based on the cultural myths, right? That have perpetuated, at least from an American standpoint, what it means to work and what it means to live. And again, this is like the fourth time I said it, but graceful repetition is important in oratory, right? Well, it's quite all right if your life's purpose is outside of work.
Yeah, absolutely. That purpose can definitely be outside of work. And I know you mentioned this earlier in our conversation, but like for some, it is, the family route. It is being a parent. It is, completing a personal goal that's not necessarily related to work. And so I think your work
Mhm,
is that important perspective on like what it is to kind of redefine purpose. Um,
mhm.
Side and outside of, like, the Western culture and kind of, like, what we have been fed to believe in regard to what purpose is. Absolutely.
I can give an example, Emily, if
Yeah.
about purpose. And so I'm in my mid-career. I guess I'm middle-aged at this point. I just turned 40 in June, and I'm doing fine. I have a PhD, but it doesn't define me. And when I interview, sometimes I interview for teaching jobs, sometimes I don't. And when I don't interview for teaching jobs, it is a hard sell because Emily, and I want to I hope this is helpful for viewers. People might try to label you or put you in a package or corner you and say, well, you're an academic and you're a PhD. And you really have to show the interviewer, you have to show people that you're not a one trick pony, that you can and you have done other things. And so I actually, yeah, I'm interviewing right now, and I'm actually, I think, a pretty good interviewer. In a person who gets interviewed, and I coach for it. I've helped people with their interviewing for what it's worth. And but I've definitely been tossed some questions such as, so you're so overqualified. You're just overqualified for this job. Well, no, actually, I have a lot to offer that I would bring. The different talents and qualifications from my background make me a good leader, influencer, and motivator and mentor in this space. You have to really show people because they're gonna corner you. They're gonna trap you with these questions and say, "Well, no, 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 you're this. You're a PhD." And sometimes I take the PhD off of my materials because
Yeah.
I want to lead them differently. And so you have to have that courage and that creativity. And I can definitely help people with that courage and creativity.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good segue to actually my last question for you. I think kind of going with that courage and creativity. After writing this book, but I kind of want to go beyond that. Like after all of your experiences with traveling the world and working with a variety of different people, writing and kind of talking about this, like I asked you like how would you answer the question today of what are you willing to do for free, but I kind of want to expand it a little bit
Yeah.
more and like, what do you hope listeners ask themselves after hearing this entire conversation in regard to purpose and like the questions they should ask themselves about, quality of life and what it is they want to do in life, whatever that might look like?
Okay. Yeah. People these days are moving, relocating because they have a good friend in another state. It's not just job based. So these quality of life transitions, moving decisions, it can be because of dogs that you have, and that a northern climate is better for dogs. It the work can fall into place. There's actually plenty of work out there. And if you're like running into a wall, like why not sell yourself in a different space? And so I've been doing that recently, and it's actually been pretty interesting and great. I'm selling myself in other spaces. You have to be confident in yourself and believe in yourself. So yeah, I also encourage people when they're being asked questions to be creative with, I know it sounds like a politician, but spinning the question in a way that works for them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because people are going to trap you with questions. So you're an academic, you're just really overqualified. But why are you applying to this job? Well, wait a minute. Spin the question, take control of the question, and show them something. Teach them something that they weren't thinking of. And of course, you're capable. Of course, you have a unique perspective on it. And that's something I've been doing. I'm really happy to talk with folks about doing that. But yeah, like what do I hope listeners take away from this talk? Be curious, be creative with yourself, with these questions. Make the question work for you. Like again, going back to my book, I asked a research question, but when I present the book to an audience in Germany for a Pechakucha, that's a different a Pechakucha presentation is a highly visual PowerPoint based presentation. I'm changing the research question and tweaking it to make sense for that event. And I think we have to do that for every interview and every encounter that we're having with folks.
That totally makes sense. And I really love the angle in which you are coming from with that and, positioning the question in a way that works for a person rather than being
Yes.
subjected to whatever way it's confining them.
Yes. Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Mary. Do you mind sharing where people can connect with you if they wish to talk to
Yeah.
you about this more or reach out to kind of, ask questions or anything of such?
Oh, sure. Please. I'm very approachable. I love talking with folks. I miss a lot of my students, by the way. I don't currently have students, but I love talking with people of all ages about what they're going through. Um, People actually kind of come to me and share a lot of information, and I definitely welcome it. So I'm Mary Eberhardinger. I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn. I have an email address. Those are places to find me. Other than that, I'm in the Southeast United States at the moment. I'll be traveling to Europe in 2 weeks. Very excited about that. I'll be in the Czech Republic and Germany for 2 weeks. But please reach out. Let's start an interaction or some kind of professional relationship, and I'd be delighted. I mean, that's what this life is all about, is getting to know people, and sometimes it can be helpful, sometimes not, but it's all about who you trust. So thank you for trusting me and inviting me on this podcast today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I hope you have wonderful and safe travels in the next
Oh,
2 weeks
yes,
on your travels.
appreciate it.
Thank you so
I
much.
will. I'll be updating on my travels on social media, so thank you.
Oh,
Yeah.
good. Awesome. And that's our conversation with Dr. Mary Eberhardinger. One of the ideas that stayed with me throughout this conversation is that our careers are about so much more than the jobs we hold. They're shaped by the experiences we have, the cultures we encounter, the relationships we build, and the stories we tell ourselves about success, purpose, and fulfillment. Communication plays a central role in all of that. It helps us make sense of where we've been, where we're going, and who we're becoming along the way. Whether you're navigating a career transition, questioning what meaningful work looks like, or simply reflecting on your own personal journey, I hope this conversation encouraged you to think a little differently about the role communication plays in shaping your path. As always, thank you for listening to Cultivate Talk. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who might find this conversation valuable. Until then, keep cultivating conversations that matter.